All right. So let's get started now. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Vasculitis Foundation webinar today. I'm Kathy Olewski, the host for the Vasculitis Educational Webinar Series, but I'm also a patient just like all of you living with MPA vasculitis. These webinars are part of the Vasculitis Foundation's commitment to patient education. And today's webinar, as you all know, is about fatigue and vasculitis with Dr. Kathy McKinnon. After we finish the webinar today, there will be a recorded version of the Vasculitis Foundation on their YouTube channel, and everyone who's registered will get an email with a link to it just as soon as it's up and available. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for today. Dr. Kathy McKinnon is an associate professor of medicine and the director of the Vasculitis Center at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina. Dr. McKinnon is board certified in internal medicine and rheumatology. So welcome, Dr. McKinnon. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Hey, thank you so. I'm happy to be here as well.
All right, we're hearing a little bit of an echo on your end. I think that's because I think you just solved the issue. We see two of your faces up here. All right, and let's, as you start, before you share screen, we were going to do the polls, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Let's see, we would need you to stop share so that I can launch the poll.
All right.
Yes, everybody, we've had a few technical difficulties, but we think we've got it worked out today. All right, and before we get started, we did want to launch this poll about just asking a few questions. I think you can see it now. Somebody give me the thumbs up. All right, how much does fatigue impact your daily life? Have you talked to your doctor about fatigue, and have you tried therapies, medications, exercises, etc. for fatigue that have been helpful? And we're going to give, there's so many of you in here. We're up to 160. I'm going to give you a little while to take the polls. And then Dr. McKinnon, once we close the polls and share, you'll be able to comment on anything you'd like to comment before you share your screen. And then also, I'll have to ask you about your disclosures at that time. All right, some of you said I don't see the poll, but I believe it's up there. So, yep, 120 of you have answered. So I think we're going to go ahead and end the poll and share that with everybody. All right, can you see those results, Dr. McKinnon?
Wow.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, 58% of you significantly, 40% moderately daily fatigue. Let's see, have you talked to your doctor? 86% of you have. I'm so happy to hear that. And have you tried therapies, medications, exercises for your fatigue that have been helpful? 29% yes, 71% no. Dr. McKinnon, you have any comments on that before we move on to your presentation?
I think that represents what I see in the clinic. I see a lot of people where fatigue is a primary problem, even when their vasculitis is under good control. And I think that the relatively low success rates of therapy are why people are tuned in today.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I just saw in the chat box, there's someone here from New Zealand and it's 5 a.m. All right, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we would love to learn more about fatigue.
Excellent. All right. So starting with the disclosures, I don't have any that are related to what we're going to talk about today, but I will mention that I do work with some of the company advisory boards for the development and use of new treatments for vasculitis. And I think that a lot of people underappreciate how severe fatigue can be in vasculitis. And people on a day-to-day basis talk about being tired and being fatigued. But I think this represents what I hear a lot of when I see people in clinic. It's just disabling, keeping you in the house, keeping you on the couch and bed fatigue. And sometimes it seems like there's no hope for this, that you're tired today, you feel like you're going to be tired tomorrow, and there's no end in sight. But I think it's good to start with what definition of what fatigue is to make sure we're all on the same page as we talk about this. So I thought this was a nice definition. describing extreme tiredness resulting from mental or physical exertion or illness. And I would say that many people with vasculitis have exhaustion from all three. And weariness, lethargy, exhaustion all kind of fit into that as a description of fatigue. So we're just talking about tiredness beyond the normal tiredness you'd expect from your day-to-day activities or what's going on with your body. And we know that fatigue can be normal if you do prolonged physical or mental effort or have episodes of sustained anxiety and stress, don't sleep enough, are in environments that are harsh, or take certain medications. Fatigue is pretty normal and an expected side effect. But fatigue and vasculitis oftentimes is a symptom of systemic illness. And if you look at common causes of fatigue, you can see there are many things that cause fatigue in addition to vasculitis. There are things that can happen with your hormonal system, the endocrine system, adrenal glands, thyroid glands. Infections that are chronic can cause fatigue. Problems with the heart and lungs, breathing problems, which could be secondary to vasculitis or from other causes, heart that doesn't work correctly, the valves are leaky, doesn't pump as strongly as it should, can cause fatigue. We'll talk more about medications in detail later because that's an important cause of vasculitis or fatigue and vasculitis. And then there are mental health and psychiatric conditions that can also cause fatigue. Problems with sleep clearly can cause fatigue. Different nutritional types of deficiencies can cause fatigue. And then there's a whole other host of other medical conditions that can be autoimmune or not autoimmune that can cause fatigue. So when somebody says they have fatigue, there's a lot of things for us to think about as physicians who take care of you as to what could be causing the fatigue. So when we talk about fatigue and chronic illnesses like vasculitis and related conditions, we know that inflammation and its effects on the body can cause fatigue. Medications that you take to treat your vasculitis can cause fatigue. Mood changes that are related to having vasculitis or the treatments for vasculitis or the effects that vasculitis has on your life can cause fatigue. Interactions with your friends, your family, how vasculitis affects your social network can cause fatigue. And then, of course, pain from vasculitis, trouble with your body from vasculitis, or the medications you take can also interfere with sleep. So there are many, many things that we can see right off the bat that can cause fatigue. There was a nice study done in the United Kingdom looking at almost 250 patients who had vasculitis. The types of vasculitis that were most common in the study were GPA, MPA, EGPA, and Behçet disease. And 91% of patients in the study reported significant fatigue, meaning that it interferes with your daily life and your daily activities. And the factors that were found strongly associated with fatigue included pain, sleep disturbance, and disease activity, meaning that patients who had active vasculitis were more likely to be fatigued. And although we think about fatigue as subjective tiredness, there are a lot of other ways that affects your body and affects your daily life. So I circle tiredness because that's what we all go to when we talk about fatigue. But you can see as you look at this table, there are many, many other manifestations of fatigue that affect your daily life and can be a very negative effect on how you function from day to day. Being fatigued can be associated with depressive symptoms, difficulty moving your body, where your body feels heavy and just difficult to move around, can cause anxiety and stress, can go along with pain, change in your memory and concentration, change in how emotionally you deal with things in day-to-day life, affect your sleep, and just general sensitivity to normal sensations that might not bother you. But things like bright lights and sounds that you never noticed before could become bothersome and even uncomfortable. And this all kind of develops into a cycle that becomes very difficult to get out of once fatigue has been present for a while. As you feel more fatigued, it becomes harder and harder to do anything. So you spend more time in the bed, more time on the couch, less time exercising or just doing normal activities outside of the house, outside of work. And as you do less, your body becomes deconditioned and it becomes harder to do anything. And as you do less for longer periods of time, your muscles actually can become weaker and not function as well. And so when you try to do anything at all, you become more fatigued. And this just goes round and round and becomes difficult to get out of. And as the cycle goes around, your quality of life goes down. It becomes harder to sleep. Most people, rightfully so, feel stressed and anxious about not being able to do the normal activities. It can affect how you think and your memory. And ultimately, it just propagates the fatigue even more and you feel more tired. So all these things do have a strong impact on your life. It can affect not just your recreational activities, but it can decrease your work productivity. It can impair your normal day-to-day decision making. It increases your chance of injury no matter what you're doing, and accidents when your body just doesn't work right, your brain doesn't work right, and you just feel like you're drained and exhausted. So we'll start with talking about inflammation as a cause of fatigue, since inflammation is the cardinal central process of vasculitis, the effects of your immune system being overactive. And explaining inflammation in simple terms is really relating to a normal process in the body that's gone awry in vasculitis. When the body perceives something as harmful, it attempts to protect itself by removing any irritants, pathogens, things like bacteria or viruses, or damaged cells. And how the body does this is by turning on the immune system. And the point of the slide is not to show the details of the immune system because that's far beyond where we want to go in this talk today. But it shows you how the normal immune function can go bad for you. So your body is exposed to something, and we think in certain types of vasculitis particularly that there's a toxin or an infection often that triggers this type of vasculitis. So if you look at the top pathway, the cells that serve as your immediate defense against infection or things that don't belong in your body, the green arrow shows that the activation of these cells shows successful elimination of the bad thing, the thing that you don't want there. But when this pathway goes awry, when it becomes overactive, you could develop conditions such as septic shock. And the bottom pathway is really more the memory of the immune system and how it reacts. And again, the green pathway shows when it's successful what happens, but when it becomes overactive and doesn't turn itself back off, it leads to allergic or autoimmune diseases. So the system that goes wrong is in process to protect you, and in most cases it works as it should, but in the case of vasculitis, it doesn't. And inflammation can be both acute or chronic. You think in terms of things acute as things that happen to you. You get exposed to some type of allergen, you get an infection, and chronic infection relates more to things like vasculitis, autoimmune diseases, cancers, neurologic diseases, something where the body's immune system is turned on and doesn't turn off as it should. And all of these things fit together to contribute to fatigue and vasculitis. And you can see there are lots of different parts of this diagram. And I think it explains why it's sometimes so very difficult to treat vasculitis successfully, because oftentimes we look at one target and treat it, and we're not looking at all the different components that are making fatigue a problem. And I put this slide in here because I feel like a lot of people that I talk to who have dealt with fatigue for a while, who have been dealing with their vasculitis, start to think it's all in their head. And inflammation in the brain is in your head, but not in the way that people sometimes think. It isn't your imagination. It isn't you just feeling extra tired, more tired than you should. It shows that inflammation actually causes changes in the brain that make you feel fatigued, that make you feel, that even affect how you act. As you can see at the top, it not only gives you the experience of fatigue, but uncertainty about how useful your actions are, changes some of your behaviors, and even decreases motivation. And I've seen people who come in my office who tell me that they feel like they're lazy, like they're not trying as hard as they should, and it's really not that. It's really all about what changes biochemically when this inflammation is present in your body. And so what do we do about it? So treating inflammation from vasculitis seems like it should be a rather straightforward proposition. If you have active disease, you treat the disease. But those of you who have been living with these diseases for long enough know that sometimes that's uncertain. If you ask your doctor, do you think my vasculitis is active? Oftentimes we'll say, we don't think so. The lab work doesn't suggest that, but it's very, very difficult to know what's going on in the inside of your body sometimes. So when my patients tell me they're tired, I ask them a lot of questions about their vasculitis. Do you feel like things are under control? Do you have any of the symptoms you had when your vasculitis was active? Are there things that have changed recently with your health? Because sometimes the CAT scans, sometimes the blood work doesn't tell the whole story. And when we're kind of on the fence about whether their vasculitis is causing the fatigue, we may opt to try increasing their treatment or modifying their treatment. And sometimes it's a difficult discussion to have. And sometimes I think doctors are less willing to treat vasculitis when some of the laboratory parameters look good. But I think we have to lean on you and trust you living in your body to tell us how things are doing. So sometimes we have to go beyond the usual lab tests, sometimes beyond the usual scans, and look a little bit harder to make sure that your vasculitis is controlled as it should be. Other things that can cause inflammation in the body when you have vasculitis include infections, which the medications we use to treat the vasculitis put you at higher risk for. Exposure in the environment, chemicals oftentimes, increased weight increases inflammation in the body, problems with sleep increase inflammation, smoking, alcohol use, and there are even some things in the diet can affect inflammation. So in addition to vasculitis, there are a lot of other processes going on in your body to be aware of. Moving on to medications as a possible cause of fatigue. When I found this table 4 as I was putting this talk together, and I looked at the list of medications they listed as common culprits, I went and listed a lot of the medications that we use in treating vasculitis. And you can see there's a very, very long list of them. Medications for pain, medications to prevent infection, medications to help with mood, some of the pre-medications we use for infusion treatments, and of course the medications we use to take the place of steroids can all cause fatigue. So if you look at this list, there are a lot of things we have to think about when you come in the office to talk about fatigue and wonder if we're not causing some of the fatigue with how we're treating you. And let's not forget about steroids, because almost everybody who's on this call has experienced steroids, may still be on steroids, and no doubt has experienced at least one, if not more, of the side effects of steroids. But I circled some of the things here that highlight how steroids can affect your energy level too. Certainly effects on mood can make you feel more fatigued. Steroids interfering with your sleep can increase fatigue. And steroids even affect your adrenal glands. And even after you come off steroids, if your adrenal glands don't go back to working as they should, the fatigue can be a result of your adrenal glands not making the normal amount of steroids that they do. So steroids oftentimes are a culprit in fatigue. So then the question becomes what to do about it, because clearly there are medications you need to be on to treat your vasculitis. It would be irresponsible and bad for you just to remove them all. So it really takes a thoughtful approach as to how to deal with it. So usually what we do is sit down and look at the list. And that's one of the first things I do when I have people come in and we talk about fatigue, is what are we giving you that might be causing fatigue? And oftentimes I can identify one or two things, some that are very high up on the list that I think are very likely to be causing fatigue, and maybe others that are lower on the list. And we just keep in the back of our mind as we work through some of these other causes. So if we find something that looks highly likely to be causing the fatigue, the first thing we talk about is this a medication that we could substitute out? Is there another medication that's less likely to cause fatigue that could take its place and work just as well? And sometimes we can, and sometimes we can't. And if we can't get rid of this medication, how do we manage the side effects of this medication for the time that you need to be on it? Because some of these medications, like steroids, we plan on being them on not permanently, but for a prescribed period of time with a plan to come off of them. So sometimes we look at timing of the dose. Sometimes if they interfere with sleep, using a sleeping aid while you have to take them. And other patients need stimulants, which oftentimes involve care with a sleep physician or psychiatrists who manage those type of medications regularly. They do have some risks and side effects, but for some of my patients, they've been very beneficial and things that we talk about when we've looked at other things that have not been helpful. And moving on to mood and stress, I think this is really an underappreciated cause of fatigue in people with vasculitis. And it doesn't matter how much you sleep, if sleep deprivation is not the cause of the fatigue, and it's really more tiredness of your soul, as this picture would state. And I found this quote, and I wanted to share it with you because I think a lot of you will identify with this. So chronic illness is a battle on all sides. You deal with the daily work of maintaining your health while grieving your past, worrying about your future, and dealing with people and medical professionals who don't believe you. And sadly, I think many of you have dealt with at least some of the aspects of this. And why wouldn't this affect your stress and mood? Because this is a very, very difficult part of having a chronic illness. And I have had many patients tell me how much this drives them crazy is when people talk about how tired they look. So this can be your current mood when you have vasculitis. You're just tired of dealing with the disease. Perhaps it's affected your job. You may not be able to work or do the job that you used to do. It's affected relationships within your family, and you've just had it. And not all of this is situational, but there's clearly an association between inflammation in the body and effects on the brain that can lead to alteration of mood. So when we say it's all in your head, we don't mean it's just something that you're thinking about, but how your body reacts to inflammation and how it affects the brain. And looking at different studies of depression and vasculitis, you can see that it occurs fairly often in patients. And I think that's understandably so, and maybe even underreported. But looking at patients who have small vessel vasculitis, the combined results showed about 28% of patients, over half the patients who had PAN, and again, about a quarter of the patients who had large vessel vasculitis like Takayasu's or giant cell arteritis. And what we see, depression is associated oftentimes with perception of illness, disability from illness, pain and poor sleep quality, but not necessarily associated with how active your disease or damage. And I will have to say that I've oftentimes seen this in patients once they've gotten through the difficult part of their disease, the very active part of their disease, and they're in a maintenance phase. They've recovered from that. They've come out of the hospital, come off of the very, very aggressive immunosuppression. And I think things just catch up with them. They realize they've been through a very serious, potentially life-threatening event. They realize they're going to be living with their disease for the rest of their life. And it all kind of hits them just like a thunderclap. And they wonder how they're going to manage this disease and how the rest of their life is going to be. And there are a lot of symptoms of depression other than feeling sad. So people ask me, how do I know if I'm depressed, if I don't feel sad? There are other things that can come up that kind of clue you into this might be a problem. Feeling hopeless or helpless about your situation, feeling guilty about many things, not taking pleasure in your usual activities, the ones that you can still do easily, feeling more angry or irritable, feeling fatigued and just having no energy, changes in appetite. There are a lot of things that can suggest that depression may be part of what's causing fatigue. And I think vasculitis and anxiety go hand in hand, especially in the beginning. You're diagnosed with a chronic disease that you have to live with lifelong. You don't know what the prognosis of your disease is at the beginning and even over time. You take medications that have potential risks and adverse effects. You worry about side effects, how this is going to affect your relationship. And you talk to people who have never heard of your disease. If you go and talk about heart problems, most of your neighbors know about them. If you talk about cancer, people are aware of that. If you talk about vasculitis, people say, what's that? And not understanding it, not knowing about it really interferes with them relating with you and what you're going through until they learn more about it. And if you ask health professionals how we manage this in vasculitis patients, there's a consensus that we could be better about this and offer more resources to patients with vasculitis. In looking at nephrology departments and rheumatology departments, the two two areas that commonly manage vasculitis. You could see that there's support lacking, the perception of support from the physicians and physician extenders who are providing care feel that we don't do a great job about it, and that most people feel like we could use additional training and resources for our patients. So when you figure out this is part of your fatigue, what do you do about it? We look at the medication list. Again, there are medications that can cause depression and anxiety. And if we want to pick a common medication, the culprit for many problems is steroids. But there are other drugs that we use in treating vasculitis that can cause this. We look for other physiologic causes, things like adrenal insufficiency from coming off of steroids, thyroid disease, nutritional deficiencies. There are other things that can happen to you when you have vasculitis that can cause mood changes. We ask about family history. Certainly, strong family history of depression or anxiety makes us think about this harder too. We assess how you're doing with these mood issues and then figure out what's going to be the best way to help treat this. Clearly, if there are medications that are causing this, we try to change the medications or withdraw them if we can. Counseling oftentimes can be very helpful in giving you extra tools in your toolbox to help manage these feelings. Medications oftentimes are needed, often temporarily, to help deal with mood issues associated with vasculitis. Psychosocial support within your family, church, other network, Vasculitis Foundation is a great place for support. And there are other more advanced options with healthcare providers in the area of behavioral health, should these not work. And moving on to sleep. Vasculitis can affect your sleep in a number of ways. The effects of inflammation, which can interfere with normal sleep patterns, effects of medication, which interfere with sleep, which we already touched on a little bit, and then, of course, the effects on emotional and psychological well-being. And this again just shows the physiologic effects of inflammation and how this moves into your sleep and can cause sleep deprivation, changes in the quality of sleep, restless leg syndrome at night. So inflammation, again, being one of the bad guys for sleep and subsequent vasculitis and fatigue. So how do you know if you have a sleep problem? Oftentimes, patients will talk about difficulty falling asleep, or if you wake up in the middle of the night, difficulty falling asleep. So you may sleep till 2 a.m., but if you're up for 3 hours after you wake up and can't fall back asleep, clearly that can be a cause of fatigue. Waking up frequently during the night can be an indication of a sleep problem. For example, patients with sleep apnea may wake themselves up because they have difficulty breathing during the night. Being tired in the morning, despite adequate time in bed asleep, is oftentimes a sign of a sleep disorder. Clearly, if you go to bed and sleep for 4 hours and wake up, you would expect to be tired. But if you have a good 7 or 8 hours in bed at night, you would not expect to still feel sleepy and tired in the morning, and that could be a sign. If you require medications to get to sleep regularly, that implies that there is a problem with sleep. And then generalized sleepiness and low energy during the day, a common sign that your sleep is not good quality. So are there things we can do to improve sleep quality in vasculitis? Once again, we start with looking at your medications and trying to make modifications if we think they're interfering with sleep. We ask you about signs or symptoms of sleep disorders, looking for things like sleep apnea, which are commonly precipitated by weight gain, and as most of you know, can be a common side effect of taking steroids, and restless leg syndrome, which can cause you to wake up periodically during the night. We talk about how you use caffeine or stimulants during the day. These certainly can interfere with sleep. We talk about getting a regular bedtime routine and a sleep schedule that can help the body recognize when it's time to sleep. Figuring out how to make your room restful. Avoiding screen time at night is hard for most of us, but that can be helpful in promoting quality sleep. And then again, looking at how to make the brain restful. If there's a lot of anxiety, worry, or other things going on, that can creep right into your sleep and make sure your sleep is not good quality. And then movement and activity, which is great for energy, but oftentimes is hard to do in vasculitis, especially when you're sick, when your vasculitis is active. So pain oftentimes accompanies vasculitis, and when you have more pain, you tend to rest. But prolonged periods of rest can cause your body to become stiffer and weaker. That can make movement more painful, which promotes less movement, which promotes deconditioning. And again, we're looking at the cycle again of what happens when you're not able to do something. So we try to figure out ways to break the cycle and help you start moving at least a little bit so this doesn't go into that downhill spiral. How does exercise help with fatigue? It does help you sleep better, can improve your sleep quality, which helps with fatigue. It improves your body's energy supply, makes you more energy efficient by affecting the powerhouse in your muscle cells and improving the oxygen circulation throughout your body. It also increases hormone levels that lead to energized feelings and can help lower anxiety and stress by effects on hormones. So all these are good for fatigue, all can help address fatigue. But there are different types of exercises, and these are right for different patients in different situations. The more classic exercise program, which doesn't work for everyone, is considered the graded exercise program. And it's a structured approach. It's very goal or target based. You plan on gradually increasing your exercise over time, assuming that your body, which in this case is pretty healthy, will adapt over time. Now, paced exercise came to the forefront in patients who had COVID, and I think this applies to many patients with chronic diseases, that your body may not be healthy and ready for this graded exercise program, and you really need to take a more flexible approach. You do exercises based on how you're feeling that day. You adjust the duration and intensity of how you're doing, not with this goal and target based approach, but the goal being to get up and do something. Do something that your body can do that day, something that's friendly to your body and doesn't cause it pain and distress. And assuming that if you try to overtrain and stay on a schedule, that you can feel even more fatigued and exhausted, which is not the goal here. And I think as physicians, we used to stick to this graded approach and thought it was a one size fits all program that worked for everybody. Clearly, it doesn't. And I think patients who have some active disease or have problems associated with their disease, lung problems from lung vasculitis, have chronic kidney problems from kidney disease and vasculitis, may do better with a more paced approach. Things like yoga can be helpful for people with chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases. It helps to balance the nervous system. It promotes mind-body connection, and being aware of how your body is doing helps you treat it better and take better care of it. It teaches some resilience. It improves sleep quality and also promotes self-compassion in a well-taught class. So there's many reasons to at least look at yoga as a possibility if you're considering adding an exercise to your program. As a martial artist, I was curious to see if there were data on how martial arts could help patients with autoimmune diseases. And it looked at martial arts in general, low impact martial arts like Tai Chi, and higher impact like karate. And all of these prove to be beneficial for a number of reasons. Can help lower inflammation in the body, improve flexibility and strength, improve conditioning, improve balance and walk distance. So if you're interested in this particular area, something to think about also as a way to incorporate activity into your daily life. And there was a study done looking at multiple autoimmune diseases and how exercise can affect the immune system. And as you can see from this diagram, different types of exercise, whether you like to walk, weight lift, train in martial arts, yoga, all of these have benefits on inflammation in the body. And we've already touched on how inflammation is a bad guy here when we're thinking about fatigue. So lots and lots of different things that you could do that could be helpful. There's just not one right pathway, but many different ways to get there. And reading a little bit more about chronic fatigue and what people have done to help themselves get started, because it is very hard when you feel exhausted and you're in pain to do anything. Some of the phrases that people have mentioned that help them get started are listed on the slide here, reminding themselves it will give me more energy. I don't have to do everything at once. can use it as a social means of connecting with a friend, taking a walk together, making it a commitment just for that day. Not that I'm going to walk every day for the next month, but I just have to do something, even it's stretching today. And slow and steady wins the race. So just encouraging yourself, being patient with yourself, being kind to yourself, and trying to do what you feel like you can do that day. And I think one of the things we oftentimes neglect in the office when we talk to you about your vasculitis and talk about fatigue is how to feed your body for energy. So we know that it's important to choose your fuel wisely. Things that can help energy, complex carbohydrates, lean proteins, nuts, yogurt, and staying hydrated. And there are things that can take away from your energy. We all think about caffeine as giving you an energy burst, but we forget to talk about the crash that comes after that and how it can affect your sleep. And then sweets, processed foods, alcohol, and then skipping meals, of course, no energy for the body if you have no fuel in there. And things that we typically think about healthy foods or beneficial to the body, many of those are also fatigue fighting superfoods. And this diagram just lists a few of them that could be incorporated into your diet. And just a quick refresher about things to avoid for preventing fatigue: processed foods, refined carbohydrates, preservatives, and additives. I think we all intrinsically know that our bodies don't like these. But if you're fighting fatigue, it's even more important to try to shift your diet away from these and try to have more energy promoting foods in your diet. I have had many, many patients ask me about supplements and vitamins for fatigue. And I'll be honest with you, I'm very open to complementary therapies and supplements and nutrition as a part of maintaining and attaining wellness and vasculitis. What we do need to remember is they're not well studied in patients with vasculitis. There are things on the market that are immune stimulants, that there are data that I can look up and find that they stimulate T cells, they stimulate B cells, increase inflammatory cytokines in the body. And those clearly we want to avoid if we're trying to tone down inflammation in the body. There are some also that can interact with your immunosuppressive medications. Obviously, that would be bad for keeping your vasculitis under control. And I think one of the big limiting steps in this is there's a lack of regulatory oversight of what's put on the market as far as supplements and vitamins. And what I mean by that is that we know the FDA regulates the medications that go on the market, but for supplements and nutritional supplements and dietary supplements, the companies are responsible for ensuring that the dietary supplements are safe. And you can see where there might be a conflict of interest there. The FDA does not review the supplements for effectiveness. They do not approve dietary supplements. And companies can even put these supplements on the market without notifying the FDA. So you're relying on the honor and the vigilance of the companies who put these supplements out. And I think there are many good companies who put out good supplements, but clearly there are some that don't highly regulate or even have things in their supplements that aren't listed on the bottle. So I thought this was a good rundown on how to think about this. If you're looking to add supplements or vitamins to your diet, you look at what's in the product, what vitamin, what supplement, what chemical, what plant is in there. You try to assess for overall quality. I'll talk a little bit about third-party certifications on the next slide, but I think this is another thing that can help give us some reassurance about what you're taking. You look at the company's reputation and business practices. There are some that are cited in the news that you can look up for lack of quality, contamination. Obviously, those type of companies you'd like to avoid. Do they have lab test results? Do they have data about the purity of their supplements? Do their marketing claims seem to make sense? Something that says it's going to cure or heal an autoimmune disease, I would look at with skepticism. And I think one of the most important things to do is to let your doctor know that you're thinking about these things. I encourage my patients to look at these if they're interested in them, and to either send me the name of what they're looking at or a snapshot of the ingredient list. And for things that I don't know, I go on PubMed, I go online, I research the ingredients. And in many cases, there are data that suggest they're potentially beneficial for inflammation. And if there's no evidence there's anything harmful or for autoimmune disease and it overall looks safe, we try it and we monitor, how the vasculitis is doing and how my patient is doing while they're taking them. There have been a number of cases where I've looked at these ingredients, some that I were not familiar with, and found there were data that they were immune stimulants, and we decided that they were probably not safe to try in somebody with autoimmune diseases. So these third-party certifications to look at is where products go to a separate agency for testing, not just the manufacturing company, where the separate agency verifies that what it says is on the bottle is in the bottle. It looks for contaminations or toxins in the product. It looks for contaminants. And there's a number of organizations listed there that are considered reliable and unbiased that could be helpful when you're looking at supplements if you'd like to take this to try to help with your fatigue. The other thing I looked at was whether there were clinical trials or studies, because you can spend a lot of money and time on supplements and nutraceuticals which don't have any proven benefit. And the ones I've circled here do have clinical trials that support their use in decreasing fatigue in patients who have autoimmune disease and appear to be safe. But there's always new studies coming out, and it's worth talking to your doctor and asking them to review any supplements you're interested in taking for safety. So we've gone through all these things today. How do you fight your chronic illness fatigue? You get the right nutrients, shrink your to-do list, get rid of the caffeine, which is kind of boosting you up during the day, get moving, take a nap, stay hydrated. Lots of things that we talked about here. And maybe you're thinking, wait a minute, I'm fatigued. And you're asking me to do all these things to feel better. And then rightfully so. But I think one of the things that we neglect to talk about as you're diagnosed with a chronic illness, vasculitis, or another autoimmune disease is how important self-care becomes when you have this disease. This is not like just getting a simple diagnosis where you take medications for a short period of time and your life goes back to normal, your activities go back to normal. You're dealing with something more long-ranging, more chronic. And oftentimes when this disease is serious, you're in the hospital, you're in the ICU, you leave your workplace for a while. Sometimes you leave your workplace forever. And it requires a change in how you look at your health and how you look at caring for yourself overall. And I included this managing symptoms and side effects from the Vasculitis Foundation website because I think it's an excellent resource for starting to think about things like self-care. And I think oftentimes as you're recovering from this, as you're fighting your way through this, it's easy to lose hope and just feel like your life has been taken over by this disease and that it may never get back to normal. But I thought the slide was a lovely way to start thinking about how to take care of yourself, how to empower yourself to take care of your vasculitis. And if you're going to incorporate these different measures to help your fatigue and help you feel better, how do you work through this mentally? How do you convince yourself? How do you use the resources that you have within yourself to find the time and energy to do this? And this kind of summarizes some of the things that come through your life on a day-to-day basis, things that take away from energy and things that can give you energy back. Very short summary, a very good reminder about how you want to be focusing your time and efforts, things that are good for you, things that can promote energy, and things in your life that you can start to work on bit by bit to take away energy too. And I think another important thing to remember is that as you work through this disease, as you live with this illness, as you deal with the after effects, that you give yourself permission to rest. That you may have had to go 100 miles an hour before, you did a job, you took care of a family, you did a lot of recreational activities, and you can't do that anymore. Doesn't mean you can't do everything. It means that you can do some things, maybe not all of them, and you have to be kind to yourself. You have to be accepting of what your body can do. Give it time to rest, but not to give up. So, in summarizing some of the things we talked about this afternoon, fatigue can come from many different causes, which makes it very, very tricky sometimes to figure out what the primary causes are and how to treat it, but it doesn't mean it's impossible to treat. And it may encompass a number of different things to make the fatigue better, working on getting the disease under better control, changing medications that are sapping you of energy, figuring out how to improve your sleep quality, figuring out what regular physical activity will work for you and your body wherever you're at in your journey with vasculitis, identifying things in your mood that are sapping your energy, looking for anxiety related disease, depression from being ill, medications that are making that worse and managing that, looking to revamp your diet to take things out that are taking away from your energy and fill your diet with things that are good that can help boost your energy, and really making self-care a priority, taking care of yourself, taking time to take care of yourself, and making your health a major priority in your life. So I wanted to add this word, which I thought was a rather funny and interesting word. Um, I had never heard of the word clanked, but as I was researching fatigue and vasculitis, it came up. It's an older word meaning to have your strength reduced or exhausted. So you could say that your vasculitis is making you clanked. But the last thing I wanted to finish up with is this quote from Confucius. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. And the journey with vasculitis can be a long one and a very exhausting one, but there are ways to get yourself back on the pathway to feeling more like yourself, having more energy, being able to do the things that you love to do, that you want to be doing. And it can be a very slow journey, but it needs to be a consistent journey. And this is where I am in Charleston. This is the university here. A very beautiful city to live in. Been here about 3 years now, and I enjoy my time here and my patients here very much. And that is all I have today. I'd be happy to take questions. I know we started a bit late, and if our moderators are able to stay, I don't mind staying late to answer questions.
Well, that was one of my questions, so I'm glad you helped me out with that. So you can stop sharing all screens now, and we are going to go to the questions. Thank you so much. I will say that as a patient living with vasculitis, currently in a flare, everything you said today helped me. So, and I know from the chat feature that a lot of people are talking about that. I'm going to jump into some questions. We've already asked Dr. McKinnon if we don't get to all the questions today, if she can come back and we'll capture the questions and we'll do a separate recorded one and we will attach that to this video on our YouTube channel. So just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we would capture your questions as best we can. Also, I'm going to ask the questions today that relate to fatigue and vasculitis. There are some in here that do not relate, and we will try and get you answers to those, but these are the ones that are important today. So starting out right at the beginning, it says prednisone may affect sleeping. If so, is there a preferred time to take, for example, morning or evening? And I know that there's a good answer to that.
I think that's a great question. We try to give prednisone in divided doses because it works better. It's not a great 24-hour round-the-clock drug. But for people who have trouble sleeping on the evening dose, oftentimes we try to weight the dose more heavily in the morning. So if you are taking a high dose of prednisone, you say you're taking 60 milligrams a day for a flare-up, we try to give you 30 and 30. Oftentimes people don't sleep well like that. So we might go 40-20, we might go 50-10, or even the full 60 first thing in the morning to try to help with that.
Okay, so that answers a couple of other people's questions. So I just wanted them to know that you got your answer there in case I don't ask it exactly. We had somebody else that said she was diagnosed in spring 2022 and is currently in clinical remission, although she's taking rituximab still. And it kind of gets to the point where she says, I have sleep apnea, I use the CPAP, but she tells her doctor all the time that she's just so fatigued and he really has no answer or explanation. And she wanted to know, did she wrongly assume that being in clinical remission doesn't necessarily mean the end of fatigue. Is it just a lingering side effect?
Well, I think as we went through in the talk, it can be many things. It doesn't have to be the vasculitis, but it can be the medications we're using to maintain remission. It could be that the sleep apnea is not as tightly controlled as we think it is. There are a lot of things to look at. Oftentimes in my patients who have sleep apnea, we may repeat a sleep study to make sure that the sleep is of good quality, or if your machine has settings on it, we look at the settings very closely to see if your sleep is as it should be. And then we start looking at other things. We start looking for whether you have adrenal insufficiency coming off the steroids, whether you could have thyroid disease, whether you could have nutritional deficiencies. But my take on this would be not to give up. If you feel fatigued, if your life is affected by fatigue, and there are things you'd like to be doing, but you can't do because you're tired, is to sit down and have a visit with your doctor just to talk about fatigue and say, listen, we've looked at these things. What other things can we look at to try to help me feel more energetic and feel better? And I'll be honest with you. As we talk to you in clinic, we spend a lot of time talking about your disease activity. As I put this lecture together over the course of a few days, I realized how little time we spend in the visit asking you about this. And I certainly am going to be more conscious, spending more time with my patients about this, and even scheduling separate visits just to talk about fatigue when their primary problem.
And maybe we can recommend this to our doctors, that they watch Dr. Kathy McKinnon from the Vasculitis Center in South Carolina, watch her presentation, because it's important. We did get a question. I did want to let everybody know that there will be a recording of this with all of the slides and everything that were shown today. It will be on the Vasculitis Foundation's YouTube channel. But Dr. McKinnon, the question came up from the Vasculitis Foundation staff, if you're comfortable with us sharing your slide presentation when we send out the email later.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And I noticed there was a lot of echo in this. If you wanted me to re-record it without the echo, I'd be happy to do that too.
We don't hear any echo.
You don't hear the echo? Okay, just me then. Okay.
We're good. Next question. Can lung scarring be a cause of fatigue?
Yes, it can.
Okay. That's
It's,
good for them to know.
I would say though, that's not a hopeless, that doesn't mean there isn't something that can be done about that. We do have patients who have some scarring or fibrosis in their lungs, and oftentimes, if fatigue is a huge problem, if they've not been through a pulmonary rehabilitation program, we will do that as a supervised exercise and training. Oftentimes, can help with that fatigue.
Okay, great information. There's a couple of people that asked about long COVID. Could the millions of sufferers with long COVID be experiencing something similar to what our vasculitis feels like? Is that the possible cause of the fatigue, or is it the vasculitis? Just, variety of questions on that topic.
Well, that's a interesting and very difficult question to answer, but I think the short answer would be yes. There can be overlap in an immune system that gets overtaxed and exhausted, and there could be some shared pathways to fatigue there.
Okay. And one person says, is shortness of breath seen with fatigue if causes of shortness of breath, such as lung or heart problems, are ruled out, or is it due to the vasculitis?
I think the first thing we look at with the vasculitis is the vasculitis active, particularly in the heart or lungs? And if those are looked at and those seem to be okay, if you've been quite ill with the vasculitis, if you've not been able to do much for a period of weeks or months, sometimes that shortness of breath can be from deconditioning too. And that's where getting into the supervised program where you slowly resume exercise as tolerated can help with that.
In this question, I mean, you talked to us today about all of the things that can cause fatigue, but this person says, how do you know if the fatigue is derived from the vasculitis, hypothyroid, age, or something else? If you're on thyroid medication and your TSH tests are normal, can you presume it's not thyroid related and it's probably the vasculitis or your medication?
I think if the TSH tests are normal, it's less likely to be thyroid related. And then we start looking at other things. We look at the vasculitis to see if it's active. We look at the medications that you're on for maintenance to make sure that you're not on medications that cause fatigue. Thyroid disease can be associated with sleep disorders too, so we look closely at sleep. And then some patients, depending on the type of diet they're following, or if they've had previous surgeries on their stomach, we look at nutritional deficiencies, which can also cause fatigue. So it's good to eliminate what you can, but if we look at a few things and don't find a cause for fatigue, it doesn't mean that there isn't one. It means we just have to look harder.
Okay, good information to take back to our doctors. This person says, I take a nap in the late afternoons, but sometimes a duration of 2+ hours. Is that too much? Does it help or hurt in the long run?
That I would ask, I guess, first how the nighttime sleep is, because sometimes naps during the day indicate that the sleep at night isn't good or the sleep
Yeah.
at night is not enough. Um, but I think if the energy is good otherwise and the sleep at night is good, if you need the naps, then it's okay to take them. I just very hard to see why you would need them.
Okay. And everybody is different.
Yep.
Talk to your doctor. During your presentation, you mentioned that some supplements can interfere with medication. You explained it pretty well, but this person says, what vitamins interact with meds, maybe our current medication list?
There's a lot of different supplements that can interact with different medications. So usually what I do is I will run an interaction check once I find out what's in the supplements and see if they interact. Our system has an electronic database that will run them against each other. There are also some online that can do that. But I think the best way to go with that is to ask your doctor about your particular medication and supplement or your pharmacist.
Okay, great. One person says, what does PEM on your exercise slide stand for?
Post-exertional malaise, meaning that your fatigue gets worse after you would do that graded type of exercise rather than better.
Okay. And what do you think? Can acupuncture help with fatigue?
I've been involved in some acupuncture trials, and I actually served as a guinea pig for one of my roommates during residency who got certified in acupuncture. So I would say that I am biased towards acupuncture. The studies do show that can help with fatigue and chronic pain. And I think for patients who are open to that as a complementary therapy can be very helpful.
Okay. And, I just want to say everybody's questions are important to them. I 100% relate to you. I'm going through all kinds of fatigue right now because I'm in a flare and I'm in all kinds of different treatment. We will do our best to get your questions answered, but we are out of time today. And I have a couple more things that I would like to and need to share with everybody before we go today. I did want to say, Dr. McKinnon, the comments in the chat box they're very, very happy with what you gave us today and how much information they got. I'd encourage everybody to share this with your loved ones and your care partners because I think it will help some of the things that you go through. So I did want to start by just sharing my screen today so I can go over one more thing with everybody before we go. See if I can make this work. Always the technology things. There we go. So as a reminder today, the webinar will be published on the Vasculitis Foundation's YouTube channel. If you haven't found that yet, go find that. There's a lot of information on there. Each person registered for today's webinar will receive a follow-up email, and we wanted to remind everyone that is the best place to look for the information afterwards. There were questions on social media about that. I'll try and go back in and post the link, but I did want to talk today about the VPPRN, the Vasculitis Patient-Powered Research Network. I just wanted to take a minute and say, did you ever wonder how you can have an impact on important vasculitis research? The answer is that you should join the VPPRN. I am a patient champion for them, which doesn't involve a whole lot of work. I just tell people about it. And I encourage others to join the VPPRN. Joining just means go sign up on their website, vpprn.org, and complete a questionnaire twice a year. It takes maybe 10 minutes each time, but it's a global patient registry. And patient data drives research in vasculitis. Providing researchers with the information about you and your experience is key for advancing the knowledge of vasculitis. So, as I said, it just takes twice a year. I actually just did my completed my questionnaire about the V-SNF campaign that I have also, which is about respiratory and nasal congestion kind of things. So it's actually very easy to do. There's a great dashboard on there that shows you everything that other patients are going through. So it's a great thing to look into. And next, I want to say that Vasculitis Awareness Month is coming up. So it is next month, actually. So watch the Joshua Roberts video, which is an EGPA patient and our featured spring appeal patient who represents the power of connections. You can find that on the Vasculitis Foundation website. Review our inspiring 2025 community hero winners and maybe join another educational webinar. You've come to this one. It's a good resource. Come to more of them. We'd appreciate it if you would share your story next month on social media or wherever and use the hashtag VAM2025 and spread awareness to your friends and family. We would love for you to connect with other fellow patients through the support groups that you can find at the if you go visit vasculitisfoundation.org website and donate to our spring appeal to support Vasculitis Foundation's programs and initiatives. Boy, is that important if you want things like this to continue. And how about look on the Vasculitis Foundation website and purchase the Vasculitis Foundation VAM t-shirt. It's actually through a store that we have called Bonfire. So it's bonfire.com/VAM2025. So that's just things you can do to promote vasculitis next month. And we did want to say thank you so much, Dr. McKinnon. I can't tell you how much that was a great presentation, how much it meant to us. And of course, thank you to the Vasculitis Foundation for supporting these medical webinars and making them possible for everyone.
I just wanted to thank you and the Vasculitis Foundation for all that you do for us and for my patients. I'm very, very grateful that they have such a wonderful resource to go to. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I would be happy to do a Q&A session or any type of recorded session because I know we didn't have time to get to everyone's questions, but I would just encourage you to be persistent. We try to remember as your doctors that you know what's going on in your body and listen to you. And I would keep having these discussions until you feel like you're heard and you're feeling better.
Thank you so much for such great reassurance that we're not all crazy and that we are all experiencing this and that there is help available.